Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today I'm going to be looking at a game by the name of The Wandering Tower. I have here a bilingual German edition. It has English rules in the box, published by Abacus Spiel. This is a race game, a family weight race game that takes about 30 minutes or so for 2 to 6 players, designed by the very famous designers Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer, who have designed plenty of family games over the years. This is definitely on the lighter side. It's almost it's a race game, so there's some light strategy to it, but it almost has the feel of a party game. You know, it's a game that you're going to be laughing at each other's misfortune. Even though it's a race game, it encourages you to capture other players' pieces, and because of that, the game takes on a bit of a Schadenfreude, trying to get in each other's way, and has, like I said, a bit of a party atmosphere. It's really simple to explain. It will only take a few minutes. I'll take those few minutes now and show you how it plays, and come back and let you know what I think about the game. The Wandering Tower is a race game where players are going to be racing around this circular track in order to be the first player to both get all of their pieces into the black tower, as well as flip all of their flasks, which are going to start empty, and they'll do that by moving these tower pieces so that they capture other players. Whenever you do that, you capture one or more players, you'll get to flip one of your flasks. The first player to achieve both of those things is going to be the winner. So what you're going to do in this game is, on your turn, you are going to have a handful of 3 cards. They're going to show some combination of wizard and or tower movement. So this one just lets you move the tower. This one gives you a choice to move your wizard or your tower. And this one lets you move a wizard, but you have to roll the die up to 2 times to determine how far that wizard's going to move. On your turn, you're going to play 2 of those 3 cards, and then you'll draw back up to 3, and you'll move your wizards and the towers always clockwise going around the track. If ever you manipulate it so that one of your wizards goes into the black tower, which is the goal of the game, your turn's going to end immediately. So just to show you an example, a player's turn might look something like this. Maybe they would choose to move a tower twice so they could capture another wizard, as well as move their wizards, which are standing on that tower, forward. So they would play that card and move twice. Again, you're always going to move clockwise, so they might choose to go 1, 2, and that would capture the yellow wizard. They don't have any wizards under there. And because they did that, they would be able to flip over one of their 5 flasks. The number of wizards that you get and the number of flasks that you're going to get are going to vary based on the player count. The fewer players that you have, the more wizards and flasks you're going to get. So that'd be their first action. For their second action, maybe then they might want to move one of their wizards. So maybe they would play this card that lets them roll the die twice. So maybe they would roll, they get 1, they don't like that. They re-roll, they get 2, but they only have 2 rolls, so they're stuck with that. So what they could do is move any wizard that is visible. So had they had a wizard under here, they wouldn't be able to move that. They would have to move this tower up and off of that first. So there's a bit of a memory aspect of the game, trying to remember where your wizards have been captured. But with their 2 wizard movement, maybe they would simply go 1, 2, like that. And then at the end of their turn, they would simply draw back up to 3 cards. It would be the next player's turn. So turns are going to go like that clockwise until somebody achieves the goal of getting one of their wizards, or all of their wizards in here, having all of their flasks flipped. If ever you get a wizard into here, even if it's on your first action, that will immediately end your turn. You won't get 2 actions on that turn. It will go an equal number of turns, so if this player triggers the end, the other 2 players will get 1 more action. So that's the basic gist of the game. However, there are a couple of wrinkles. The first being that as you flip these over, these potions, you could use them to cast spells. In the basic version of the game, there's going to be 2 spells available, and you can see they have a cost over here. This one costs 1 flask, filled flask to use, and this one costs 2 filled flasks to use. This one lets you move a wizard 1 extra space, and this one lets you move a tower 2 extra spaces. And in the basic version of the game, only the player whose actual turn it is could use these to move. So for example, if they had a wizard here, they could simply spend 2 of these, and then they would get their wizard into the castle. That would achieve that. These 2 flasks that they have, they wouldn't need to still have those filled at the end of the game. They simply need to flip over any empty tasks. So if multiple people finish on the same turn at the end of the game, let's say this player triggers the end, but then this player also finishes, the player who has the most filled flasks is going to be your tiebreaker. So that is basically how the basic game works. And then there's a more advanced game which you could use. There's different spells that you could bring in, and you could bring in any number of these that you want, depending on how chaotic you want it to be. And these have various effects. So this one, for example, lets you piggyback off of another wizard's movement. You could play these in the advanced game even when it's another player's turn. Up to 2 spells could be cast per player's turn, basically one tied to each action. And you could interrupt a player's action by doing that. And if multiple players wanted to cast a spell, they would determine in clockwise order who gets to actually do that, starting with the active player. So this one, it reduces your movement by 1. They're relatively straightforward, but the more of these that you introduce and that will be available at a time, the more chaotic the game could be. That's pretty much the only real difference between the basic game and the advanced game. As I said, as the game goes on, you're going to be stacking these towers up higher and higher, and there'll be wizards trapped here, and there'll be a lot of players who are moving only partial towers when they take their moves. So you'll really have to pay attention to be able to track your wizard, even though you only have 5 of them or so. So a lot of the game is based on the chaos of interacting with other players, and other players basically being required to capture your wizards in order to be able to end the game. So it's definitely not as simple as a rules explanation might make it appear. Alright, so that is the Wandering Tower, and as you can see, this is a very straightforward game. The game is not quite a roll and move, although I suppose you are rolling a die when you play certain numbers of the cards. But because you have multiple cards and you have multiple pawns, at least until the end of the game, you don't feel strictly without choice during the game. It's very rare that you have to use the action to get rid of your cards and draw new cards, except for maybe at the end of the game. This is pretty similar to a relatively famous game from the same designers, Verflixt, which is a roll and move game where you have similarly multiple pawns and you're racing along a A to B path, and instead of trying to get to an end goal, you're actually collecting tiles as you go for points. And this is like a real favorite of mine. This is one that I've kept in my collection for decades. This is the new printing of it, but I've had the old American version, which was called That's Life, well out of print at this point. But this is a game that I really enjoy. This one I think I enjoy slightly less. It feels a little less variable than Verflixt and a little bit less strategic, possibly because I've played it with 4 or 5 players, and it just feels chaotic at that point. But I think because of the kind of game that it is, which is basically one where you're trying to capture other people, you're trying to get in each other's way, mess each other up, so they don't win. If you can't make a good move, making somebody else have a bad move is a good alternative. That sort of game. It doesn't feel like a take that game, but it has that element of, well, the best move I can make is to hurt you, going for it. So because of that, the game is chaotic by its design. And I think because it's only maybe a 30-minute game, it doesn't matter if you have more players because you get fewer pawns. It still is going to take about 30 minutes with whether you have 2 players or 6 players. For this weight of game, I think that works fine, especially in a family setting or a light gaming session. Something that I didn't mention in the rules explanation, I realize, is that whenever a player goes into the black tower, the black tower is actually going to move ahead to the next space that shows a shield on it. And because of that, essentially, players who were near the black tower but not yet in it, now all of a sudden have to travel further on their next turn to get into the black tower, because the black tower is also moving clockwise around. So you get crazy things where you have a tower stack of like six pieces with a black tower on top of it, and that's moving around on the board. So the game just and thematically it makes sense. It's a game about magic and chaos and wizards casting off spells. I think it matches its theme well, and the atmosphere comes through when you're playing, which is terrific. It just doesn't feel particularly strategic, since your moves are always going to be dictated by the 3 cards that you have. Somehow Verflixt, which is just a roll and move game where you're just rolling 1 die each turn and then determining which of your pawns you're going to move. Somehow that feels a little bit more strategic, because sometimes you're staying on a space just to keep another player from getting a tile, because in that game the last player to leave a tile will be the person who claims it, which if you use a high point tile, you want to be the person who does that. This game doesn't quite have that sort of standoff aspect of it. You're going to be capturing people's pawns, but you don't care if it's player A or if it's player B. Any pawn that you capture lets you flip one of your potions over, so it doesn't matter, especially which player you're targeting. So I feel like it's a slightly less strategic game, which is weird to say about either of these games. They're mostly tactical and mostly light games. But this one doesn't have, I think, the depth of the other one. Now, where it does try to add into the depth is by introducing the spells. There's an advanced variant, and I have to say that the advanced variant, where you could interrupt an action on not your turn, is a little bit inelegant. Essentially, like you take an action and another player might say, okay, wait, I want to do an action, and the player before this says, well, if you're going to do an action, I'm going to cast a spell instead. And it just sort of breaks up the flow of the game. For me, I think I would rather play with the basic spells, or maybe just throw in the other spells, but only limit it to one action per turn. There's some spells that really affect other players, so you just maybe not use those. And I think the game scales in that regard for that, but the attempt here to make it slightly more strategic and slightly more interactive, for me, just kind of breaks the flow of the game. It doesn't make it a bad game. It's just, I don't need to go around every turn and say, does anybody want to cast a spell? Okay, then I'll play my second card. That just kind of breaks up what this game is going for me. I don't want this game to push, over 30 minutes. And I think if you're playing with that variant, it might. Of course, the number of spells that you're going to be able to capture during a game or cast during a game is going to be relatively low, because you're only able to cast a spell if you flipped over a potion, and you generally don't want to cast the spells because often the game is going to end with multiple players finishing on the same turn, and then tiebreaker is going to be how many flasks you have left. So I might be over exaggerating how much the advanced variant of the game slows it down, but it does feel like a clunky way to try to add depth to what is basically a simple race game. I will say that, though, as a simple race game, it's fine. I do like it. Like I said, I like Verflixt more, so this one is now currently imprinted. I think this is a current edition, so I would recommend this over this. But if you have this and really like this and just want some variety, something a little bit more goofy, a little bit more thematic, this would be a good game to get as well. But, like I said, it's going up against, to me, this is one of the great filler games that's been made. So I love Verflixt. This one I think is fine. I like it. I don't mind playing it. And I think that the actual physical production of it with the towers that stack on each other, and as simple as it is, the little memory aspect of it, for me, is if I have a very poor short-term memory, it's hard for me to remember which of my towers the piece is under. So when I move a tower, and lo and behold, I was one floor up. That's always a good laughing moment when we're playing the game. So I guess generally speaking, those are my thoughts on the Wandering Tower. And thank you for watching.